Michael burst into his office, slamming the door with a force that echoed through the room. His hands, shaking uncontrollably, fumbled with the bottom drawer of his desk, from which he retrieved a crumpled pack of cigarettes. Struggling initially, his attempts to light a cigarette were marred by his unsteady grip. When the flame finally caught, he inhaled deeply, the nicotine rush steadying his trembling hands and slowing his racing heart. Although he had given up smoking months ago, today's overwhelming circumstances made this lapse forgivable. Gazing pensively out the window, Michael's thoughts drifted through the chapters of his life. For 2 decades, he had dedicated himself to the demanding yet fulfilling profession of surgery. His decision to become a doctor had been a steadfast one from a young age, driven by a noble desire to help and save lives. Medical school, which overwhelmed many, was a relatively smooth journey for Mikhail, his exceptional aptitude earning him high regard from the dean, a connection that later influenced his employment. Joining a state hospital, he swiftly established himself as a skilled and competent specialist. His dedication was evident in his relentless pursuit of knowledge, poring over medical textbooks and enhancing his skills. Recognized for his expertise, he was entrusted with intricate surgeries, a role that evoked envy among his peers. They whispered of unseen patrons aiding his career, but Michael remained undeterred, devoted to his profession and amassing invaluable experience. Yet, amidst this illustrious career, Michael's personal life had taken a back seat. Family life eluded him, his sole kin being his supportive mother. His intense commitment to work deterred potential partners, leaving him solitary in his achievements. Now, as he stood by the window, a new sensation crept into his heart: fear. For the first time in his career, a patient had perished on his operating table. The circumstances were beyond his control. The patient's critical condition upon arrival had left little hope. Despite his best efforts, the outcome was inevitable. Questions plagued his mind. How could this have happened? How would he face the patient's family? His hand, betraying his inner turmoil, shook visibly. A knock at the door jolted him from his reverie. Absorbed in his thoughts, he didn't respond at first. The persistent knocking eventually drew him to the door. Behind it stood Chief Physician Samantha, a formidable presence in her 40s, known for her penetrating gaze that seemed to dissect a person's very soul. A few years prior, Michael and Samantha's relationship transcended professional boundaries, evolving into a romantic partnership. However, their romance was short-lived. Despite Samantha's deep understanding of the demands of a medical career, she found herself unwilling to compete with Michael's all-consuming devotion to his work. After a few years of cohabitation, they mutually decided to part ways, resuming their roles as amicable colleagues. As Samantha stepped into Michael's office, her expression was stern yet concerned. She eyed the cigarette in his hand with a mix of disapproval and understanding. "Couldn't resist?" she inquired, her tone even, yet tinged with empathy. Michael, visibly shaken, responded, "There's a reason, as you know. I can't shake the feeling that I could have saved him." Samantha's response was sharp, yet her voice carried an underlying warmth. "Calm down. What's done is done, and you're well aware it was too late to save him. It's not your fault. Why torment yourself with guilt now?" "I know," Michael sighed heavily, "but it's my first time facing this in my career. I can't stop blaming myself, even though I know it's irrational." "That's not the right approach, Michael," Samantha replied, her hand resting gently on his in a gesture of support. Accepting that not every patient can be saved is a harsh reality of our profession. It's a difficult truth to come to terms with, but you must. While you're grappling with guilt, there are still patients out there who need you. Have you considered taking a break? When was your last vacation? Michael's response was listless. What does it matter? It matters a lot, Samantha countered, her voice rising with urgency. You need to take at least a week off. Right now, you're vulnerable to falling into a depressive state, and I can't allow that. When was the last time you visited the mountains? Some time away, especially in the fresh mountain air, might help clear your mind and bring you back to yourself, she advised earnestly. Michael, recalling his past fondness for hiking, saw the wisdom in Samantha's suggestion. The idea of a temporary escape to the mountains appealed to him, offering a much-needed respite from his current turmoil. Starting tomorrow, don't come in. I expect you back here on the 3rd. Go home now, rest, Samantha instructed firmly. What about informing the patient's family? Michael inquired, his concern evident. I'll handle it. It's a sensitive situation, and the patient was a complex case. We're trying to contact his wife, but she seems to be unreachable at the moment. I understand she's currently away, Samantha explained. Michael exhaled deeply. It's unimaginable, the shock she'll face learning about her husband's passing, he said, his voice tinged with sadness. Samantha assured him she would take care of everything. That evening, Michael busied himself packing a tent and essentials for his trip, a welcome distraction from the day's events. The next morning, he set off for the mountains, deliberately disconnecting from the world by turning off his phone, seeking solace in the solitude of nature. During his week-long retreat, he gradually processed and made peace with the situation. Upon his return to work, Michael immediately sensed a shift in the atmosphere. Colleagues exchanged covert glances and whispered behind his back, their expressions ranging from curious to disapproving. Confused and increasingly uneasy, he wondered if this strange behavior was connected to the patient's death. With a sense of foreboding, he made his way to Samantha's office. Entering the office, his heart sank as he heard the word, fired. Disbelief and panic surged through him. His breath quickened, hands shaking uncontrollably, and his heart raced with a ferocity that threatened to overwhelm him. The reality of his situation, so stark and unexpected, hit him with the force of a physical blow. Samantha's words struck Michael with the weight of finality. The patient's widow escalated the situation by involving the media. Journalists have been relentlessly pursuing me. The man you operated on had significant connections, putting our hospital under immense scrutiny. We had no choice but to take this action, Michael. It's a tough situation, but your departure might help to ease the tensions with the deceased's family. Michael stood there, stunned, struggling to process the gravity of the situation. He left Samantha's office almost mechanically, his mind numb with disbelief. In his own office, he packed his personal items into a box, each item a reminder of the 2 decades spent transforming from an eager medical student to a distinguished surgeon. Memories of gratitude, tears of joy, and countless lives touched within these walls flooded his mind. With a heavy heart, he closed the door behind him, marking the end of an era. He found himself sitting in his car in the hospital parking lot for hours, lost in a sea of tumultuous thoughts. Glancing at social media on his phone, he was bombarded with posts branding him a doctor killer. Armchair critics speculated on the patient's case, while others hurled insults and blamed the hospital and Michael for the tragedy. The whole scenario felt surreal, like a nightmarish spectacle he couldn't escape. Realizing his hunger, Michael started his car and drove to the nearest supermarket. His actions felt automatic, disconnected from the chaos of his thoughts. The supermarket, just steps from his house, seemed like a mundane sanctuary in the midst of his turmoil. In the store, Michael wandered the aisles in a daze, his mind elsewhere as he filled his cart without conscious thought. It was only at the checkout that he realized he had aimlessly gathered 3 bags worth of groceries. Surprised at his own absent-mindedness, but unable to muster the energy to return the items, he paid and left the store, his movements slow and heavy with the weight of the day's events. "Excuse me," a voice called from a distance. Michael was momentarily startled by the voice calling out to him. It took a second before he realized it was directed at him. Turning, he saw a woman in worn, threadbare clothing, clutching the hand of a small girl. "I'm sorry to bother you," the woman began, her voice tinged with reluctance. "It's okay. How can I help you?" Michael asked, his fingers aching under the weight of the grocery bags. He was eager to return home, but the evident distress in the woman's voice made him pause. The woman seemed hesitant, clearly uncomfortable with her request. "I hate to ask this, but could you possibly spare some money? My daughter is very hungry and I just wanted to buy her something to eat," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Accompanying her words, the little girl let out a soft whimper. The child's appearance spoke volumes. She was noticeably undernourished, her thin frame and dark circles under her eyes painting a stark picture of their plight. The mother's condition was no better. Michael was aware of how some people exploited others' sympathy with fabricated stories of hardship. But as he observed the pair, he sensed a genuine need in their demeanor. "I don't have any cash on me," Michael replied honestly, his tone somewhat brisk. He looked at the bags in his hands, filled with more groceries than he needed. "But I can give you some of these groceries. I'm not sure why I bought so much," he added, a hint of irony in his voice. "Maybe they were meant for you," he mused, handing one of the bags to the woman. The little girl's eyes tracked the bag with a look of hope and anticipation, her expression brightening at the prospect of food. The woman's gratitude was palpable. "Thank you so much, sir. This means a lot to us. I wouldn't ask if it weren't for my daughter. She's been unwell and hasn't had much to eat," she explained, her voice filled with a mix of relief and appreciation. "You can go home and cook something for your daughter," he said, beginning to walk away. However, as he distanced himself, he heard the faint voice of the little girl. "But Mommy, we don't have a place to keep all this stuff. What are we going to do?" she asked, her voice tinged with worry. The mother quickly tried to shush her daughter, urging her to be quiet, but their conversation had already reached Michael's ears. He stopped abruptly, the little girl's words echoing in his mind. Turning back, he observed the mother and daughter more closely. The child's demeanor was one of quiet fright, her large eyes betraying her vulnerability. Compelled by a deep sense of concern, Michael approached them again. "Where are you from? What happened to you?" he asked, his voice soft yet insistent. The woman, hesitant and clearly uncomfortable, began to respond. "Oh, it's nothing, sir. I just don't really have a job and—" She trailed off as her daughter's eyes welled up with tears. "Mummy's too scared to tell anyone. We have nowhere to go, sir. I don't want to sleep under the bridge again. Please, can you help us?" The little girl pleaded, her tearful gaze fixed intently on Michael. The raw honesty in her eyes and the desperation of her plea struck a chord in Michael's heart. The woman, perhaps embarrassed or overwhelmed by her daughter's candid outburst, quickly interjected. "Lucy, stop. Please don't mind her, sir. Thank you so much for your help," she said, hastily trying to move away with the groceries. Michael stood there for a moment, watching them retreat. The plight of the mother and daughter, so starkly contrasted with his own personal turmoil, resonated deeply within him. He found himself contemplating their situation, his own troubles momentarily pushed to the background by the urgency of their need. Michael offered the bag of groceries to the woman, hoping it would provide some relief. "Here, this should help. You can go home and cook something for your daughter," he said, beginning to walk away. However, as he distanced himself, he heard the faint voice of the little girl. "But Mommy, we don't have a place to keep all this stuff. What are we going to do?" she asked, her voice tinged with worry. The mother quickly tried to shush her daughter, urging her to be quiet, but their conversation had already reached Michael's ears. He stopped abruptly, the little girl's words echoing in his mind. Turning back, he observed the mother and daughter more closely. The child's demeanor was one of quiet fright, her large eyes betraying her vulnerability. Compelled by a deep sense of concern, Michael approached them again. "Where are you from? What happened to you?" he asked, his voice soft yet insistent. The woman, hesitant and clearly uncomfortable, began to respond. "Oh, it's nothing, sir. I just don't really have a job and—" She trailed off as her daughter's eyes welled up with tears. "Mommy's too scared to tell anyone. We have nowhere to go, sir. I don't want to sleep under the bridge again. Please, can you help us?" The little girl pleaded, her tearful gaze fixed intently on Michael. The raw honesty in her eyes and the desperation of her plea struck a chord in Michael's heart. The woman, perhaps embarrassed or overwhelmed by her daughter's candid outburst, quickly interjected. "Lucy, stop. Please don't mind her, sir. Thank you so much for your help," she said, hastily trying to move away with the groceries. Michael was taken aback by the immediacy and sincerity of the little girl's plea. As the mother hurriedly led her daughter away, the girl kept glancing back, her eyes conveying a silent appeal for help. "Wait," Michael called out, his voice cutting through the distance between them. "I live just a few blocks from here. My mother usually stays with me, but she's out of town currently. There's a spare room in my apartment. Let's go there now and you can explain everything to me. You can stay there for a while, at least until you figure out what to do next. All right?" he proposed. The woman looked at him, visibly stunned by the offer. "What? But you don't even know us and we don't know you," she replied, a mix of disbelief and cautious hope in her voice. Michael, moved by the dire situation, insisted. "Look at your daughter. She's shivering. Please, just get in the car," he urged, his concern overriding any hesitations. As they headed to his apartment, Michael chastised himself for his initial judgmental thoughts. He was upset for having doubted their authenticity, even for a moment. Upon arriving, he ushered the mother and daughter into his home. The guests sat timidly in the living room while Michael hurried to the kitchen to prepare something to eat. The reality of his own situation, the sudden upheaval of his career and the uncertainty of his future, temporarily faded into the background as he focused on his unexpected guests. Life, Michael reflected, was indeed unpredictable. As he served scrambled eggs with tomatoes to the little girl, he watched her eat with an eagerness born of hunger. It brought a smile to his face. As a surgeon, Michael had always felt a deep empathy for children, having witnessed the struggles of many young patients fighting for their lives. This little girl, though her battle was different, faced challenges no less daunting. "Thank you. Thank you so much," Lucy said, her voice quivering with emotion. Michael responded with a gentle smile. "You're welcome. It's my job to protect kids like you." But his words trailed off as a wave of sorrow washed over him, reminded of his recent dismissal from the hospital, a place he had once held dear, led by a woman he had once loved. Breaking the moment of reflection, Michael introduced himself. "By the way, my name is Michael." "I'm Amy, and this is my daughter Lucy. She's 6 years old," the woman replied, offering a weary smile. Concerned, Michael inquired further, "How long have you been in this situation?" "It's been about 2 weeks," Amy began, her voice steady but laced with underlying distress. "It's due to my husband. To put it briefly, he drinks excessively, and when he's drunk, he becomes violent. I've become somewhat accustomed to it. But recently, his aggression intensified." Michael was taken aback by Amy's matter-of-fact tone about such a traumatic experience. "And you were okay with that?" he asked, unable to mask his surprise. Amy met his gaze with a sad smile. "It's a common question. The abuse started shortly after we were married. Harold was completely different before that, kind and caring. But then he changed, became excessively jealous, always questioning my whereabouts, my company. He despised my friends, making it simpler for me to just stay home to avoid provoking him. He threatened to harm us if we ever spoke about the abuse. We escaped while he was asleep, stayed in a budget hotel until our money ran out. I've tried to find work, but it's hard with a child. Employers assume it'll impact my job performance," she explained, her voice tinged with resignation. Michael glanced at Lucy, who was now contentedly eating a bun. "Did you go to the police about your husband's behavior?" Michael queried, his concern evident. Amy met his gaze with a resigned expression. "He is the police. My father could help, but I can't bring myself to tell him. He warned me against marrying Harold from the start. The thought of admitting he was right. It's too humiliating," she admitted with a melancholic smile. As Michael absorbed her story, he couldn't help but think of his own mother. He remembered her often sitting in the kitchen, tears streaming down her face. Young and unaware of her struggles, he would try to comfort her, wiping away her tears with his small hands. She would smile through her sorrow and embrace him tightly. The parallels between Amy and Lucy's situation and his own past with his mother were striking. Feeling a strong desire to help, he offered, "You can stay here with me. My mum's away at our small farm about 20 miles from here and won't be returning soon. You can use her room. She's very understanding and wouldn't object." "Really?" Amy looked at him, her eyes reflecting a blend of hope and skepticism. "I'll take care of the housework in exchange." "Don't worry about that. Just focus on resting. You don't owe anything," Michael reassured her. He then added, "Regarding your husband, it's important to report his actions. You might have to consider divorcing him." Amy's expression turned to one of despair. "I'm scared he'll take Lucy. I don't have a job or a home while he has money, a house, connections. They might grant him custody." Michael responded with a comforting firmness. "It's not always about who has more connections. I have friends who can help, competent lawyers, even a judge I know. You're not alone in this. You're going to be all right," he assured them, hoping to alleviate some of her fears and offer a glimpse of a more hopeful future. Amy, enveloped in a sense of security she hadn't experienced in a long time, felt a comforting brotherly presence in Michael. They lingered in the kitchen, engaging in conversation until fatigue set in. Amy, noticing Lucy had fallen asleep to the hum of the TV, carefully lifted her and carried her to the bedroom, grateful for the safe haven they had found. Meanwhile, Michael found himself on a phone call with his mother, Helen, who was audibly upset. "Fired? How could they dismiss a professional like you?" she exclaimed. "Mom, it's complicated. I'd rather not discuss it over the phone," Michael responded, trying to avoid delving into the painful details. "Then come to the farm. You're free now, and I could really use your help. There's so much work, and it's tough handling it alone. Will you come?" Helen's voice carried a mix of hope and need. Michael hesitated, his mind turning to Amy and Lucy. It felt uncomfortable to think of leaving them alone in his apartment. While Amy's story seemed genuine, there was always an element of uncertainty in leaving strangers in one's home. Yet he couldn't ignore his mother's request either. "I'll be waiting, son. Just be careful," Helen advised before ending the call. "All right, Mom. I'll see you soon," Michael assured her, though his thoughts were conflicted. He had just woken up when the call came, and the conversation left him fully alert. He decided to make a quick trip to the farm, trusting that Amy and Lucy would be all right in his apartment. Entering the kitchen, still groggy from sleep, Michael was surprised to find Amy already up and active. She had tidied the kitchen and prepared breakfast, with a steaming cup of coffee waiting for him on the table. "Sorry for taking the initiative here. When I heard you were awake, I thought I'd come and make some breakfast," Amy explained, her voice tinged with a hint of apology. Michael smiled warmly at her. "Oh no, please feel at home. I honestly didn't expect you to prepare breakfast, but I appreciate it," he said, genuinely grateful. Amy's smile broadened. "I've been doing this mechanically for so many years, but today it felt different, enjoyable. I just wasn't sure about your preferences. Like if you eat eggs or not," she added modestly. Michael was pleasantly surprised as he surveyed the breakfast spread. Amy had prepared more than just eggs. There were also pancakes that looked invitingly delicious. He hadn't seen such a hearty breakfast since his childhood. "Wow, pancakes! It's been ages since I've had these. They remind me of the ones my dad used to make. After he and my mum divorced, she sort of erased all memories of him, including his pancake recipe," he shared, starting to eat. Amy nodded in understanding. "I actually learned to make these from my father. He used to prepare them on Sundays, usually with raspberry jam. They were always a treat," she reminisced. "What a coincidence," Michael mused. "By the way, where's Lucy? Is she still asleep?" he inquired. "Oh, she's been up for a while. I gave her some pencils and paper. She's drawing in the other room. Lucy loves drawing and is quite talented," Amy replied, her face lighting up at the mention of her daughter. "That's wonderful. It's important to nurture such talents. I used to be into drawing as a kid too, but eventually gave it up. Maybe I should get her some quality drawing pencils and a sketchbook. I can easily pick them up later," Michael offered thoughtfully. Amy's eyes shone with gratitude. "That would be incredibly kind of you." Michael then broached the subject of his impending departure. "Amy, I need to leave for a few days to help my mom out at the farm. But please, you and Lucy can stay here. Make yourselves comfortable. There's plenty of food in the fridge, and I'll leave some money for any extras you might need," he explained, wanting to ensure they felt secure in his absence. Amy's discomfort was palpable as she pondered the trust Michael was placing in her. "You're leaving us alone in your apartment, but you hardly know us," she said, a hint of worry in her voice. "It's okay, Amy. Don't worry about it. Think of this as part of my care for you and Lucy, like a doctor with his patients," Michael reassured her with a comforting smile. Amy, still somewhat in disbelief, managed a smile. "Okay, thank you so much. I'm at a loss for words," she said, her gratitude evident. Standing by the stove, Amy was filled with a sense of bewilderment and gratitude towards Michael, who had shown such unexpected trust and kindness towards her and her daughter. Later that evening, Michael arrived at the farm, always appreciating the transition from the bustling city to the tranquil countryside. The drive through the scenic landscape to their modest house was a journey from chaos to serenity. He inhaled deeply, savoring the fresh scent of grass, and for the first time that day, a genuine smile graced his face. He understood his mother's preference for this peaceful retreat. Their farm, nestled in a picturesque setting with forests flanking two sides, was a testament to Helen's dedication and love for gardening. Her flower gardens were a riot of colours, the envy of neighbouring farms, a result of her green thumb and untold secrets of gardening. Michael held deep respect and admiration for his mother, Helen. Even in her 70s, she exuded vitality and grace. After the divorce, she single-handedly raised Michael while managing the farm and household. The physical labour, rather than wearing her down, served as a distraction from her personal woes and kept her strong. Helen rarely mentioned Stephen, Michael's father. Michael's memories of his father were vague, characterized by long work hours and late arrivals home. It was Helen who was the constant presence in his life, managing the household, nurturing her son, and ensuring a warm, loving home. Tensions between his parents escalated when Michael started first grade, marked by frequent arguments, his mother's tears, and his father's prolonged absences. The day Michael's father packed his suitcase and left remains vivid in Michael's memory. His father's parting embrace, the kiss on his forehead, and the solemn words declaring Michael the man of the house imprinted themselves deeply in his young mind. From that moment, he felt an innate sense of responsibility towards his mother. Helen's frequent tears and sleepless nights weighed heavily on him, and although his father occasionally called or took him out for walks in the park, treating him to ice cream, toys, and sweets, these meetings dwindled over time, eventually ceasing altogether. Michael's inquiries about his father were often met with silence from his mother. However, in a rare moment of frustration, Helen revealed the harsh truth. His father had started another family, implying that Michael should abandon any expectations of his return. This revelation shattered Michael's world. He was engulfed in a storm of grief, anger, and betrayal, but eventually acceptance settled in. He understood that his emotional outbursts only added to his mother's distress. Embracing his role as the man of the house, he vowed to be the protector of his family. One day, Michael announced his decision to become a doctor. Helen, surprised by his sudden resolve, cautioned him about the challenges of the profession. It's a noble path, but not an easy one. A doctor holds people's lives in their hands. But for now, focus on resting, studying, and enjoying your childhood, she advised, with a mix of concern and pride. That conversation marked a turning point for both mother and son. They hugged, cried, and for the first time, opened up about their deepest fears and pent-up emotions. The heart-to-heart talk was cathartic, releasing years of suppressed feelings. Even after many years, Michael vividly remembered that moment. It was a defining experience that fortified him, guiding him through life's challenges and fueling his determination to achieve his goals. Helen's face brightened as she spotted Michael. "Son, welcome!" she called out, rushing to greet him. With a smile of genuine affection, Michael stepped out of the car and warmly embraced his mother. "How have you been, Mom? I've been worried about you too. I know there's a lot of talk about the hospital situation," he said, trying to sound reassuring. "Mom," Michael said with a stern but caring tone, "I've told you not to pay attention to all that news. I'm going to hire a lawyer and clear my name. It's mostly sensationalism to attract viewers." Helen sighed, a mix of worry and relief in her eyes. "All right, son. Let's go inside. I made your favorite salad." As they sat down at the table, Michael steered the conversation away from his troubles. He wanted to keep the atmosphere light and not burden his mother with his problems. They eventually moved to the terrace, enveloped in the tranquility of the evening. Crickets chirped in the background, and the sunset painted the sky in warm hues. Michael found himself enveloped in the peacefulness of the farm. "It's so peaceful here," he mused internally. "Perhaps I should consider leaving the city, moving here, and embracing the farming life. I've saved enough to make it work." "Mom," he suddenly spoke up, breaking the silence. Helen, who seemed to have drifted into a light doze, opened her eyes. "What is it, son?" she asked with a hint of concern. "I need to tell you something," Michael said, choosing his words carefully. Helen's expression turned attentive, sensing the seriousness in his voice. "What's on your mind? You sound worried." "Oh, it's nothing bad," Michael reassured her quickly. "Actually, on my way home yesterday, I met a woman and her child in dire straits. I couldn't just leave them there." "That's very kind of you, Michael. Helping those in need is always a good thing," Helen said, her face softening with a smile. "That's not all, Mom. I've offered them a place to stay with us for a while," he revealed. Helen's eyebrows shot up in surprise. "Stay with us? What do you mean by that?" "Mom, they really have nowhere else to go. It didn't feel right to turn my back on them," Michael explained, hoping his mother would understand his decision. Michael took a deep breath and relayed Amy's story to his mother. Helen listened intently, her expression shifting between surprise and concern. "But how can you just leave strangers in your apartment? What about our valuables, electronics?" Helen asked, her worry evident. Michael responded with a hint of exasperation. "What electronics, Mom? I highly doubt they're interested in taking anything. They're in a desperate situation, just looking for a safe place." Seeing Amy's eyes, they reminded me of how you looked years ago, alone and vulnerable. But you had me, even as a child. They have nobody. Helen's brows furrowed in worry. "But what if she's just pretending? What if she's a professional con artist?" Michael shook his head. "Mum, realistically, how many people would actually let a stranger into their home? It's not a very effective con. And you should see Lucy, she's so thin. It's heartbreaking. I've dedicated my life to helping people through medicine. Shouldn't I also help with what I can offer personally?" Helen's gaze lingered on her son, a mix of doubt and pride in her eyes. She was worried, yet she couldn't help but feel proud of the compassionate man she had raised. The next few days passed quickly. As Michael prepared to return to the city, Helen expressed a desire to accompany him. However, Michael declined, explaining that he needed to prepare Amy for her arrival and ensure that his trust hadn't been misplaced. "Mum, what if I bring them here instead? The fresh air would be good for Lucy, and Amy seems willing to help out with work on the farm," Michael proposed. Helen hesitated, the uncertainty clear on her face. "I'm not sure, son. I hope you haven't made a mistake in trusting them. Bring them over. Let's meet them and see what kind of people they are," she finally said, giving a cautious nod of approval. As Michael approached his apartment, he lingered outside, observing the quiet windows. No signs of life were visible, sparking a momentary fear that his guests might have left. The door, however, was locked from the inside. His apprehension was dispelled when Amy opened the door after he rang the bell. She looked noticeably different. The fear had left her face, replaced by a semblance of happiness and health. "I'm back," Michael announced as he stepped in. "How have things been here?" Lucy emerged shyly, her large blue eyes fixed on Michael. "We're doing well," Amy said with a smile. "We've been busy drawing. Thank you for the pencils and paints. Lucy hasn't been this happy in a long while. That's great to hear. I'd love to see your drawings. How about I make us some tea? Michael suggested, eager to see Lucy's artwork. No, let me. Lunch is also ready, Amy insisted, a newfound confidence in her voice. The aroma from the kitchen caught Michael's attention. It smells fantastic in here. Let's head to the kitchen then, he said, pleasantly surprised by the homely atmosphere. Lucy dashed off and returned shortly with a collection of her drawings. Michael was genuinely impressed by her skill, especially for such a young child. Lucy, your talent is remarkable. We should think about enrolling you in an art school, he mused. Amy began to protest, but Michael cut her off. Lucy, would you like to learn to draw like professional artists? He asked the little girl directly. Yes, Lucy replied, her voice soft but filled with enthusiasm. Over tea, Michael turned to Amy. I'll help you find a job. It's important to stay strong, especially for Lucy. We'll look for affordable housing too, and I can lend you some money to get started. It won't be easy initially, but I'm confident things will improve. Amy, overwhelmed by his generosity, asked, Why are you helping us so much? Michael's reply was heartfelt. I'm doing this because I genuinely want to. It's essential to nurture dreams and talents. My mother always said that, and her support and belief in me shaped who I am today. I just want to extend that same support to you and Lucy. Michael expressed his gratitude for the delicious lunch Amy had prepared, inwardly acknowledging her culinary skills. Feeling the toll of his journey, he suggested, I think I'll rest a bit. I'm quite tired. And by the way, we could visit the farm in the next few days. I think you and Lucy would enjoy it there. Amy appeared hesitant. I'm not sure. It might be awkward with your mother there. Don't worry, I've already spoken to her about you both. She knows the situation, Michael reassured her. Really? Was she upset about you bringing strangers home? Amy asked, a note of concern in her voice. No, she understands. She's been through tough times herself, and she knows where I get my helping nature from, Michael replied, reflecting on his mother's influence on his character. Lucy loves the outdoors. I think it'll be a great experience for her, Amy said with a smile, warming up to the idea. Perfect. Then it's settled, Michael said, before retiring to his room for a much-needed nap. When he woke up, the apartment was enveloped in a serene quiet. Assuming Amy and Lucy might also be resting, Michael stepped out of the bedroom quietly. As he passed the living room, he noticed Amy sitting on the sofa, her back to him, engrossed in something. Curious, Michael tiptoed into the room and softly cleared his throat, causing Amy to startle. I didn't mean to frighten you, he said gently. In her hands, he recognized an old family album. I couldn't sleep, so I thought I'd read something. Then I found this album and got curious. I'll put it back right away, Amy explained, slightly flustered. It's all right. I haven't looked through it myself in ages. Let's go through it together, Michael suggested, joining her on the sofa. Pointing to a photo he shared. This was my first day of school. I remember being so nervous. He chuckled, turning the pages. Here's a picnic during my college years, and this is from my first day at work. Oh, and this one's from a visit to my aunt's place. He narrated each memory, a mix of nostalgia and amusement in his voice as he shared snippets of his life with Amy. Amy's attention was captivated by the photographs, her eyes following each image as Michael reminisced. As they neared the end of the album, Michael prepared to close it, but Amy swiftly turned to the last page, insisting, "The most interesting photos are always at the end." Her laughter was light and genuine. Michael was about to protest, but Amy was quicker, revealing the last page. The moment she saw a particular photo, her expression changed abruptly. The image of a young boy and a man seemed to strike a chord with her, and she inhaled sharply. "Are you okay?" Michael asked, concern etching his features. "Who is this?" Amy pointed to the man in the photo. "That's my father, Stephen," Michael replied, a hint of confusion in his voice. "Why do you ask?" Amy's complexion paled as she asked, "What was his full name?" "Stephen Clark. Is everything all right?" "You look unsettled," Michael observed, his worry growing. "I just need a moment to process this," Amy said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Process what?" Michael was clearly baffled. Amy silently removed a necklace with a heart-shaped pendant and handed it to Michael, urging him to open it. He did, and his heart skipped a beat. Inside the locket was a photo of a young girl and a man, unmistakably his father. "What?" Michael gasped, his face draining of colour. "Yes, Stephen is my father too, but not by blood," Amy clarified. Michael's expression was a mix of shock and disbelief. A heavy silence enveloped the room as they both grappled with the revelation. "I don't understand. Is he married to your mother?" Michael managed to ask, his voice unsteady. Amy looked at Michael, equally stunned by the unexpected connection. She realized she owed him an explanation. Taking a deep breath, she prepared to unravel her story, a story that intertwined their lives in a way neither of them could have anticipated. Amy's story unraveled a past filled with hardship and poignant moments. After the loss of her father, she and her mother faced life's challenges alone. As a child, Amy couldn't fully comprehend the gravity of their situation. Her mother's battle with a serious illness further strained their already fragile circumstances. Medical expenses consumed their savings, leaving little for luxuries. Amy recalled a particularly painful episode from her childhood. In a store, she had spotted a doll she longed for, one frequently advertised on television. When she asked her mother to buy it, she was met with a firm refusal. Young Amy couldn't understand why her mother, who seemed to buy treats for herself, wouldn't grant her this simple wish. She was unaware that what she thought were treats were actually her mother's much-needed medications. One day, while her mother was loading groceries into their car, a man approached them, holding the doll Amy had desired. He offered it to Amy as a gift. Initially, her mother resisted, but the man, with a gentle smile, expressed his long-held wish to have a daughter and insisted on giving the doll to Amy. It was a small act of kindness that left a lasting impression. Their paths crossed again, unexpectedly, at the clinic where both their families were receiving medical care. That's how their families became acquainted. Michael interjected softly, "I know what happened next. He met your mother, fell in love with her, and that's when he left us." Amy, however, quickly corrected him. "No, that's not right. They never had a romantic relationship. What are you talking about?" Amy's revelation shed new light on their intertwined histories. "Stephen just wanted to help us," she explained. "He would bring groceries, medicines. He was a kind soul who couldn't bear to see our struggle. Around that time, problems arose in your family. Your mother suspected infidelity and their relationship became strained. One day, we coincidentally left the clinic at the same time as your mother was there. She saw us together and jumped to conclusions, accusing Stephen of having another family and claiming I was his illegitimate child. It was a terrible scene. My mother tried to explain, but she wasn't heard. Amy's tone was somber as she recounted the aftermath. After that, my mum forbade Stephen from seeing us, fearing it was harming his family life. But after she passed, I reached out to him. He had already left your family and was living alone. When he learned I might be placed in foster care, he took custody of me. That's how he became my father in every way but blood. Michael listened, his understanding of past events unraveling. The narrative he had grown up with, his father as a deserter, was crumbling. He had always sought a reason for his father's departure, but never grasped the true complexity of the situation. After a moment of reflection, Michael shared his perspective. My parents split when I was 7. Dad used to visit, talk about my life, even tried to reconcile with Mom. But she couldn't get past the hurt. I remember asking her why they fought. One day, she told me he had a new family. After that, I stopped asking about him, didn't care where he was. Mom did everything she could for me. She worked tirelessly, always ensuring I had toys, clothes, anything I needed, so I wouldn't feel left out among other kids. Amy's gaze, brimming with tears, met Michael's. There was an intensity in her eyes, a mixture of sadness and revelation. Your father often cried, you know, she began. I caught him crying on several occasions. He'd try to hide it, but I always knew. I used to wonder why. I think, Michael, you were the reason for those tears. She continued, her voice breaking with emotion. I remember once, when I was about 10, finding him crying after he had a bit to drink. He was laughing and crying at the same time. I asked him why, and he told me about someone he missed terribly, but couldn't see because another person wouldn't allow it. Amy paused, wiping away her tears. I never realized he was crying over missing you. I always felt guilty, thinking I was the reason for his sorrow. But one time, he bought a cake for your birthday. We blew out the candles and wished you a happy birthday, just the two of us. Michael, overwhelmed by this revelation, found tears streaming down his own face. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to express the pain and resentment he had harbored towards his father. This new perspective on his father's actions and feelings turned his long-held beliefs upside down. After a moment of silence, Michael inquired softly, Is he still alive? How is he doing? Yes, he's alive, Amy replied, her voice tinged with a quiet sadness. But he doesn't know about my current situation. I never wanted to burden him with my problems. In the following days, as Michael processed these revelations, he decided to visit his mother's farm, planning to introduce Amy and Lucy to Ellen. She was unaware of the extraordinary connections and discoveries that had recently come to light. As the trio set off for Ellen's farm, Michael found himself revisiting memories from his childhood. His lifelong resentment towards his father had shaped many of his choices, including his career as a doctor. Now, with the truth unveiled and his perspective altered, he felt a sense of release from the bitterness he had carried for so long. As Michael drove towards the farm, his mind was preoccupied with thoughts of how his mother, Ellen, would react to the revelations about Stephen and Amy. Ellen had lived under the belief that Stephen had been unfaithful, a belief that led to the end of their marriage. She held a firm view on relationships, believing in a lifelong commitment where any betrayal was unforgivable. Michael anticipated her reaction with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. Meanwhile, Amy, sitting beside him, frequently stole glances at Michael. She reflected on her childhood memories, where Michael was a constant, albeit distant, figure, the absent son who, in her mind, had unjustly harbored resentment towards Stephen. However, as she grew older and experienced the complexities of life herself, her perspective shifted. She now understood the intricacies of familial relationships and the burdens of unspoken truths. Upon arriving at the farm, they were greeted by Ellen, busy tending to her flowers as usual. She waved cheerfully, unaware of the significant conversation that awaited her. Ellen's hospitality was as warm as ever. When she took a closer look at Amy, a flicker of confusion crossed her face, but she quickly set it aside. Ellen and Lucy formed an instant bond, with the little girl eagerly engaging with her. Amy, with her natural warmth and kindness, swiftly found her place in the kitchen, assisting Ellen and further endearing herself to Michael's mother. Lunch was a pleasant affair, highlighted by Ellen's renowned apple pie. Michael observed, somewhat surprised, the easy rapport forming between his mother and Amy. After lunch, with a sense of resolve, Michael decided it was time to unveil the full story. He recounted everything Amy had told him. Initially, Ellen thought it was some kind of joke, but the seriousness on their faces soon made her realize the truth of their words. The revelation left Ellen in a state of shock. She had lived with a certain narrative for so many years, and this new information was a lot to process. It was a moment of profound revelation, and Ellen needed time to come to terms with the unexpected ties that now connected their family to Amy's. Michael, witnessing his mother's emotional turmoil, spoke with a gentle, understanding tone. "Mum, it's okay. I know it's a lot to take in. I had the same feeling, a whirlwind of emotions, trying to reconcile the past with these new revelations." Ellen, her expression a mix of shock and introspection, paused to collect her thoughts. She took a moment to compose herself, her hand slightly trembling as she reached for her water glass. Michael watched, realizing the depth of her feelings and the years of misunderstanding that lay between them. Ellen began to share her perspective, her voice quavering. "Michael, when you were young and hurt your arm, I felt overwhelmed and alone. Your father's absence weighed heavily on me. I started to believe he was neglecting us for someone else. My friend Angela's words only fueled my suspicions." Michael listened intently, his expression a blend of sympathy and realization. Ellen's eyes held a distant look as she recounted the painful memories. "I saw them one day, Stephen and a woman, with a little girl. It confirmed all my fears. In my mind, there was no other explanation. I was convinced he had a secret family. The sight of that girl with him shattered everything I believed about our life together." Her voice broke as she continued, but now, knowing the truth, understanding that it was Amy and her mother, not a secret family, it changes everything. I judged too quickly, acted on assumptions. If only I had listened, maybe things would have been different. Michael absorbed his mother's confession, a mixture of sorrow and understanding in his eyes. Ellen's tears mirrored the depth of her regret and the pain of years lost to misunderstanding. "Mom, I don't hate you," Michael said softly. "I can't even begin to imagine how difficult it was for you. We all make mistakes, especially when we're hurt and confused." Ellen continued, her voice breaking with emotion. "I was so sure of his betrayal. I couldn't see past my anger and hurt. I never gave him a chance to explain. And the more I heard about him being seen with Amy, the more convinced I became of his infidelity." Michael listened, his heart aching for both his parents. "It's okay, Mom. You were doing what you thought was best at the time," he reassured her, though his own voice trembled with emotion. Ellen's confession revealed the years of guilt and self-blame she carried. "I've lived with this regret for so long, Michael. If I had known the truth earlier, maybe things could have been different. she lamented, her hands trembling as she took the glass of water from Amy. Michael watched as his mother's gaze shifted to Amy, a look of realization and sadness in her eyes. Ellen's voice faltered as she apologized again, the weight of her past decisions heavy upon her. Struggling to compose himself, Michael finally spoke, his voice barely a whisper. "Mom, I get it. You were both just kids back then. Life has its own way of unfolding," Michael said, his voice catching as he grappled with what to say next. "I spent my whole life feeling sorry for you, thinking you were the victim and Dad was the bad guy," he admitted, tears rolling down his face. He got up and walked outside into the yard, needing a moment alone. "Michael, my boy, you have every reason to be angry with me. If it's possible, please forgive me. I've been regretting what I did for so long," Ellen replied, her voice thick with regret. "Why didn't you ever tell me the truth?" Michael asked, his voice trailing off as he walked away. The following days were quiet. Michael kept to himself, not really wanting to talk to anyone. He spent hours alone outside, keeping busy with chores around the house. At meals, he ate in silence, quickly returning to his work afterwards. Amy, Lucy, and Ellen seemed to find comfort in each other's company, working together to cook and clean. Then, one spring morning, Michael and Ellen woke up to find that Amy and Lucy were gone. They had left without a word. Michael felt a mix of disappointment and hurt. He hadn't expected thanks for everything he had done, but a goodbye would have meant something. That evening, Michael and Ellen sat quietly on the porch, watching the sunset in silence. They were both lost in their own thoughts, so much so that they didn't notice a dust cloud forming on the horizon, their attention fixed in the opposite direction. The dust cloud was actually stirred up by the tires of an old Chevy truck, barreling down the country road at an unusually brisk pace. It careened over the bumps without slowing, raising a plume of dust in its wake. Michael glanced momentarily at the truck, his gaze then returning to the tranquil sunset. He assumed it was just a passerby cutting across their farm, but then it clicked. The road led to a dead end. The truck was heading straight for their property. True to his realization, the truck skidded to a halt at their gates. A figure in a cowboy hat emerged from the passenger side and swung the gates wide open. From their vantage point on the porch, Michael and Helen couldn't quite discern the person's identity. A flicker of concern crossed their faces. As they approached the gates, the figure's identity became clear. It was Amy. A smile broke across Michael's face, a relief washing over him. He had a hunch they wouldn't just leave without a word. "Mum, it's Amy. She's back," he called out excitedly, his voice carrying a mix of surprise and joy. A man stepped out of the driver's side of the truck. Amy quickly removed the cowboy hat she was wearing and playfully placed it on the man's head. Michael noticed the man had a slight limp but couldn't immediately place who he was. However, as Helen drew nearer and Michael observed the expression on her face, realization slowly dawned on him. Amy stood by with a knowing smile, surrounded by a profound silence, punctuated only by the creaking of the truck's door as little Lucy emerged. Lucy approached Michael, took his hand, and gently pulled him towards the truck's driver. "Uncle Mike, this is Grandpa Stephen, your daddy. You should give him a hug. Didn't you tell me you missed him?" Lucy inquired innocently. In that moment, Stephen, who had been fighting back tears, could no longer hold them in. Michael closed the distance in a few quick steps, embracing his father in a deeply emotional reunion. Overwhelmed, Michael wept openly on his father's shoulder. They remained locked in the embrace for several long minutes, a testament to the years of separation and longing. As they finally released each other, Stephen's gaze fell upon Helen, who was standing a short distance away. He began to limp towards her, but Michael quickly stepped in, offering his shoulder for support. Stephen's expression remained serious as he reached Helen. No words were exchanged. Instead, he enveloped her in a warm embrace. It was a simple yet profound gesture, conveying forgiveness and reconciliation in a way that words couldn't capture. As they walked together toward the house, a sense of healing and closure settled over them. This was the moment Stefan had been waiting for nearly his entire life. Despite his typically reserved nature, his heart was immense, and in that moment, it overflowed with a profound longing for a reunited family. Amy and Lucy, hand in hand, followed closely behind. Amy couldn't contain her happiness as she witnessed the family coming back together. It was a moment of profound significance, a testament to the enduring power of love and forgiveness to mend even the deepest of wounds. Lucy's innocent eyes remained fixed on Michael, who had stolen a moment to exchange a meaningful glance with her. Although Lucy was just a child, her thoughts and perceptions often mirrored those of adults. She found immense joy in witnessing the tears of happiness in Michael's eyes. It was her way of repaying all the kindness and support that Michael had shown her and her mother throughout their journey. In that simple exchange of glances, a silent understanding passed between them, affirming the deep bond they had forged during their time together. It was a testament to the profound impact that acts of kindness and selfless